Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2016, and let's kick off as we like to do. Let's nerd out! I haven't nerded out about WoW in so long. It's not appropriate for the web show, and I've had to do family stuff and all that loser crap. And now I want to sit down and do what I made my job in the first place, which is talk about important stuff in World of Warcraft to a very niche audience, and that's you guys. So we're going to do that today. I did, just before the Christmas break, I did like my first iteration overview of the first alpha that we got for Legion. And I raised some concerns that are potentially there, but potentially not, about some of the class design. And as I said in that iteration, is I truly believe most of that Legion alpha was just for the artifact quest lines and not much to do with the class design. But there were certainly some pointers, some flags, some directions as to where they're going. And I pointed out the lack of, or the culling of interactivity and interaction amongst nearly every single spec. I mean, that was why it's a flag. If it was happening to one or two, yeah, maybe it's not implemented yet, but it was happening to everything, man. All the interactivity, all the choices you can make, all the roads you can travel were being stripped away in favor of a system where you can hit a potential skill ceiling very, very quickly. And I mentioned that perhaps this is going to cause another form of player burnout. And people say, well, that's not burnout, that's just being bored. Oh, burnout comes in many forms, and I would certainly consider one, if you're playing too goddamn much and it's like taking over your IRL, then yeah, that's burnout. But also, if you're playing and you love the game, right, you want to play the game, but what you're doing is fucking boring, you're going to burn out on it as well, as I would consider it, but you can leave that to your own decision. What is interactivity and what are we talking about? It's the ability to make choice. Choice is really cool, because choice gives you something to think about in a world where everybody's doing something a little bit different. You're making choices that will either improve your performance or decrease your performance. Making the right choice has the reward of having higher gains, right? We want to make some gains. You're going to get that crispy business on the DPS meter, or you're going to not die whereas somebody else did die all the time, or you're going to out-heal everybody to a tremendous amount, and it's not because you had some fucking ludicrous absorbs, right? Those are the choices you make. If it works, big reward, big happy, like it, big smiles all around, and you feel good. You made a good choice there. You learn from it. You can make that choice again. Make the wrong choice. You learn from that as well. And you have this ever-developing path that you're traveling. Now, what is the interactivity, and what are we talking about here? Procs. Procs are like the easiest form that people understand, right? You understand a proc, something happens, and you react to it. And that is about it. Procs are one of the simplest ways of having forms of interactivity, and honestly, with 10 years on, the procs aren't that interesting. This is what I said about the Outlaw Rogue. It's like, yeah, we have a proc here where we shoot the gun, but it's no different than what Assassinations had forever, and it's just not that interesting. It just gives us combo points as does our other abilities. That's about it. There's not much to do there other than it lights up and then we decide whether to press the button or not. That's about it. And in terms of long-term gameplay, I'm talking when you're like hundreds of hours deep, right? When you're really settled in, that is not something that's particularly interesting. All classes need depth, in my opinion. Now, what we saw is a backlash of some people saying, I like this. It's easier, right? It's easier. It's simpler. It's not something I have to really worry about. It'll stop a lot of RNG in my DPS, I think. All these kind of ideas were flying out. And while in some cases that is true, it's what are you giving up to achieve that? What are you giving up? And ultimately what we're ending up is, in a realistic situation, is one, some people suggesting that class balance needs to go by the wayside, which is nuts. As somebody who played an MMO where class balance was a secondary thought, you don't want to live there. Because guess what happens? Everybody plays the most overpowered spec. Why wouldn't you? There's nothing hardcore about playing the underpowered broken spec. That's just stupid. Everyone plays the same thing. You don't want that. You really don't. It might sound cool to be overpowered, but historically being overpowered, especially in WoW, has never really ended well. Unless it's the very end of the expansion. You're one of the lucky ones who managed to end up overpowered in a time where it just didn't matter anymore. Generally speaking, you don't want to be. You don't want to be. You want to be near the top is ideal. Near the top is really, really good. And stay there. But not at the top compared to everybody else. So, yeah, the class balance thing? No. No, we need class balance. Class balance does so many good things. It's outrageous to even consider it. But on the other side of it, the idea that having too much interaction is a big problem and makes the spec less fun. I talked often about moments of glory. moments of glory are when your class really sort of takes flight. Some of it is RNG involved, but when it happens, it feels really good. It's a ton of fun, and it's absolutely very enjoyable. And these moments don't happen too often, otherwise it's just standard gameplays. This is how my spec plays, but you're certainly capable of doing that. The best moments of glory is when it's a little bit of RNG, as which always exists in these type of games, but there's a lot of choice. You made that happen. That was cool. In the background, I'm going to show you some of the iterations of a spell that's existed from vanilla to show how Blizzard added in a lot of this depth. Now, I've chosen this spell specifically, it's combustion for the mages, is that it's been a godsend and a burden and a nightmare all at the same time, as the more and more iterations where they added more depth and the ability to choose and the ability to register the ongoing events of the fight and when to actually click the button have altered it from a spell which guaranteed 3 critical strikes in 13 casts, right? That was its original choice. In fact, it's very original. Not many know this. The very original combustion just gave you 1 guaranteed crit strike, like the old Cold Blood. Yeah, and that was very quickly changed. I think patch 1.1 or 1.2, something like that. To a spell which, as many of you know if you played Warlords of Draenor or even played Mists of Pandaria for that example, to a spell that was capable of setting the world on fire if put in the hands of the right player. Right? The right player with a lot of gear and a little bit of RNG thrown in just gave it that little edge. So you'll see all the iterations going through there. Now, my issue with this is, I understand the Blizzard's stance on their stance is that a reasonable player who has some awareness of what their spec is like, right? We're not talking about a guy who just installed or just boosted to 100, has slapped like 30 spells in his bars and doesn't know what the fuck's going on. A reasonable player who gets a sort of understanding of how the spec should work should be able to achieve 80 to 90% of what their characters in its current gearing should be able to achieve. The rest of it's going to come from the depth. The next 10%, the next 20% is going to come from your ability to, 1, adjust to the nature of a fight, and manage to do things like track trinket procs and time things a little bit better, and more importantly, understand the mechanics of how your spec works. This has been a sort of defining characteristic of WoW for a really long time, and it's what's allowed people to play the game for such a long time, because you were ever growing, ever developing, as we just discussed. It doesn't matter if you felt that you would hit your cap, you would then probably realize something that you didn't, that allowed you to push a little bit further, to have these moments of glory, to try and set them up again, and to try and make that work into your fight, understand timings of fights, and exactly how your spells interacted with each other. And it led to, and what you'll see in the background again, is a lot of tooltip creep. Blizzard was very big on adding interesting choice into the game. They added things where you would be a huge party to how the big final result would come out, and that was very cool, although in the case of combustion and other spells, it did lead to a large gulf should you do it wrong. Let's say combustion, for example, and this is why I chose it, you could either have a 1 million combustion or a 10k if you didn't know what you were doing, which is too much, right? We're all agreed, that's too much. It doesn't need to be that way, it should be something pretty close to it. Now, what we've seen in Legion is that for nearly every single spec, they have massively toned back your ability to interact with your class on any other level than procs, and even in some cases, removed procs entirely in favor of a very, very static playstyle. And I really worry about this. And I'd love to see your guys' thoughts down below. This is something that could really kill the game, and this is why I think it's worthy of discussion now, and hopefully we can get this topic rolling, and hopefully in the next Legion Alpha, we can look back and say, we didn't need to worry. But right now, this kind of thing does exist, and nearly every spec has had this stripped away from it. Look at the Ret Paladin, look at the Outlaw Rogue, look at the Windwalker, look at nearly every DPS spec has had this stripped away. Look at the Mage, it's had the Phoenix Flames, but they don't interact with the core mechanics of the spec. They don't give you heating up, they don't give you Power Blasts, they don't do these things. They're just a nice tacked on, very controlled ability. Why is it a problem for me? On a very base level, once you take out the ability to pick and choose and understand mechanics of spells, what you ultimately end up with in my eyes when I look at the screen is about 5 buttons where one hits the hardest, one hits the weakest, and then we have the staggered intervals in between, and basically we just press whatever's not on cooldown. Now you give me that for a couple of 100 hours and I'll fucking shoot myself. What I want is the ability to make a choice like we've had in the past. Like as a rogue over Warlords of Draenor, everybody has the ability to press Shadow Dance and get some reasonable results out of it. But as a good player, what I want to do is pool my energy so it's absolutely crispy, so it's like a smoothly, professionally paid for blowjob. and set up that all my dots are going to work out really well during this window of opportunity so I get the absolute best out of it. I don't care if the guy next to me gets near enough by not thinking about these things, but I absolutely want to get to the stage where I'm thinking about this to a really perfect timing. I want to get my things like expose armor absolutely crispy. I want to refresh them at like 0.1 seconds left so I have huge uptime. The difference is what? 1 or 2 white attacks? It's not a big deal, right? Potentially. But it's something I can work on and become a better player rather than being like, oh, I'm done now. That's it. I've learnt it. It didn't take me long to learn because there's not that much going on. And now I'm just relying entirely, and this is my big nightmare, on gear to do the job for me. And Blizzard seems to like this in some respects. We've seen many examples in the past where they have sacrificed fun in some spells in order to make things easier to balance and way more controlled from their side, rather than risking some things maybe getting out of hand or creating this gulf between top guilds and middle ground guilds, and even just slightly lower guilds than the top guilds, where the DPS difference or the healing difference or the mitigation difference is so enormous. So enormous that being able to balance fights is incredibly difficult. I understand it's a fine line to walk, but what I'm seeing right now is taking things almost back to a vanilla level. If we then again look at combustion. If we look at where combustion is in Legion, it has been absolutely stripped back to its bare bones. It doubles your crit chance. That's about it. It grants you mastery equal to crit, and nothing more. You consider the kind of thought process and the preparation that went into combustion for the last 3 expansions. And I'm not saying that combustion didn't go too far on several occasions. It absolutely did. But you take away all that preparation, you take away all that thought, you take away nearly enough everything that made that spell interesting, and you turn it into something that doubles your crit. It's reliable, it's steady, it'll always work, and it's fucking boring, right? And that's the situation. When it comes to really fun things, we generally don't pick the uber reliable. We don't. I don't want it to do the same thing from the moment I install the game to the point where I finish the game. I want things to happen with it. I want to see it be able to grow with my ability to play. I think that is crucially important, is that we see these moments of absolute glory and we had a part to play in it. I'm probably a little salty because I essentially gave up on a sort of competitive DPS. I hit 99th percentile several times. But I knew in my heart of hearts that getting a first or, being number 1 was nothing to do with me. And that really strips me bare bones, bareback prison rules of motivation. I don't want to be the buttered guy in the shower. I want my soap in my hand, and it's my choice whether to throw it on the floor and let Leroy have a go. I want that to be my choice. And when you take that choice away, or make that choice so easy as it's not worth making, which I think is the important part, that really boggles my mind. So, I'd love to see your thoughts on it. I really love it. Is this something that bothers you? Because very mixed reactions from what I've seen so far. I've been doing a little bit of research while I've not been making content for the last few days. I have been reading up and getting ready to make content and planning out the next few videos. And very mixed reactions. Some people are like, I want nice, simple, and easy. I don't mind gear dictating a lot of what my results are. And I have to say, that feels way less rewarding to me, way less interesting, and ultimately, I don't think you're giving it the long thought here as to what about when you're in the first week and you're still getting used to the new fun toys that you've been given. Look 2 months down the line, 3 months down the line. Are you going to be looking to alts not because it's a fun thing to do in your spare time, not because you've finished a lot of content on your main, but simply because your main is turning into a repetitive, dull cycle every single fight, regardless of whatever you're doing the exact same. Doesn't matter if you're in a raid, it doesn't matter if you're leveling, it doesn't matter if you're PvPing. To a certain extent, you're just kind of doing the same thing. You have way less choice, way less control, and so much less potential for these really fun, outstanding moments of glory. Let me know, guys. Let's get a topic going for the new year. Have fun. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.